Wow, this place gets messy real fast. I should probably clean this up before I attract mice. I don't think it's that big a deal. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? How? Sorry about that, folks. Had a minor rodent infestation that I had to deal with. But it seems to all be taken care of now, so I can finally get back on track with reviewing Studio Series Cup. Kind of fitting now that I think of it. My last two videos were about Hot Rod and Rodimus Prime, who were voiced by Judd Nelson, who, like me, hails from the state of Maine. And now I'm doing a video about the Autobots' resident boomer, and Maine is the state with the most boomers. It's kind of like poetry, it rhymes. Behold, the pickup truck of tomorrow! Cup's vehicle mode is probably one of the most ridiculed vehicle designs the movie came up with, and I would be lying if I said I couldn't see it. Still, we're not here to judge that, we're here to judge the toy. And the toy does capture the shape of the truck really well. Granted, it's not that complex of a design, fundamentally just being a thick wedge in between two rectangles, but even the subtler details are captured. The recessed nose piece is obvious, but less obvious are things like the groove wrapping around the back of the truck cab, or the little ridge across the back of the roof. Even the back of the truck has a lot of cartoon model referential details. I don't quite understand what the door-looking thing is, but it's cool that it's here. I like how it integrates an exposed hinge piece as part of the detail. And he even has the tiny little fins coming off the sides, though the robot feet kind of cut them off before they can wrap around fully. We know by now that Hasbro likes adding a bunch of panel lines to their G1 figures today. Fortunately for Cup here, there was a lot of panel lining on his animation model to begin with, so Hasbro already had a starting point to work with. The sort of faux headlights, the crosswise panel line across his hood, and the rectangular bed on his roof are all straight out of Cup's animation model. It's the same story along the sides, with that big swooping arc, the vertical line towards the front, and the big trapezoidal section at the back. They've built on those details, of course. They added a lot of rivet holes, continued some of the designs, and even added some completely new patterns. But it all plays very well with the existing detail. Though this panel line should not be cutting through the Autobot symbol like this. And that brings me to this figure's main issue when it comes to accuracy. Yet again, it's color. I guess Hasbro didn't have access to the original color sheets or something, because instead they based this toy's color palette off of a fan-colored model, which was created by just eye-dropping screenshots from the show. This not only means that the color tones are slightly off, but also affects the actual color layout. The rear cab section on the fan-colored model was colored in the same light green as the fenders, when the actual model clearly depicts it as being the base dark green. And while I think the extra hit of color does make him nicer to look at, it does go against the whole screen accuracy angle. Fortunately, the buzzworthy Bumblebee re-release of this toy corrects most of these issues, coloring the figure directly off of his appearance in the movie. He can roll in this mode, naturally. The wheels are simply friction clipped in place, but they spin freely, allowing for smooth rolling. There are also slots on either side of the truck for storing his accessories. And that's all it does. There are no 5mm ports in this mode, no blast effect mounting points. What you see is what you get. Which kinda stinks. Even at the deluxe price point, most figures have at least a little bit more play value than this. But Cup just ends up feeling bland in comparison. And that's basically it for the truck mode. I will give it this. It does very little, but it does it pretty well. It's a very faithful recreation of Cup's original truck mode, which is really all it sets out to be. And honestly, it is neat having a tiny plastic replica of this vehicle mode. Even if it is a stupid design that looks nothing like any real truck that any real automaker would actually make in the real world. Huh. Let's just cut to the transformation then. Cup does something I always thought was a neat transformation trick, using the fist hole as a connection point. In this case, the fists grab onto a pair of pegs on the bottom of the truck bed. The bed then splits into a pair of panels, which fold up onto the backs of the legs, and then get covered up by the back section of the fenders. Then we get another neat trick, where you open up the shin panel, unlocking a hinge that allows you to straighten the leg out, which then gets locked back into place by that same shin panel. Untabbing the roof is a bit of a hassle, since the tabs holding it in place hook underneath the windshield. But once it's lifted up, the arms can fold out to the sides, making way for the entire truck to unfold into the robot body. From here, the wheels fold up into the void space, and the arm panels fold down to replace them in a very slight bit of cheating. The shoulders then fold up into their proper position, and lock in so tightly that it can be difficult to get them transformed back, especially with the thin hinge piece the panels are connected to. Also, when tabbing the roof piece into the back, make sure that the strut it's mounted on tabs into the back of the midsection, otherwise it just will not hold together. But once that's done, all you need to do is get everything situated, and you basically have a finished robot. From the front, Cup's robot mode bears a very strong resemblance to his animation model. Though I will admit, he's looking a little thin. The midsection was made narrower to fit inside the truck body, that's understandable, and I guess the arms are thinned out to fit under the truck bed. But that doesn't change the fact that this figure does come out looking rather frail, even by Cup standards. At least most of the details are there. His boots have the right shapes, and all the panel lines are there, plus some extra. There's even a tiny dot of paint right where it should be. And the arms are a similar story, with his weird elbow pads and wrist cuffs fully molded and painted. Even the inset ridges are molded into the back of his forearms. The grill-like detail on his midsection is carried over too, albeit compressed quite a bit. Then again, his belt buckle is almost pathetically small, and he's also missing his side skirts. Getting in close at the head sculpt, the anemic look continues. The face sculpt is very nice, he even has the eye bags molded in, but the helmet is thinned out, and I'm not even sure why. It's not like there wasn't enough room inside the truck cab for a thicker helmet. And even if there wasn't, I think the face and cranium could probably stand to shrink down some. It's nicely detailed, with both his little forehead crest and ear discs, and some extra panel lining. He even has light piping. But overall, this figure's aesthetic comes out looking a little awkward. At least the articulation isn't so awkward. The neck is on a ball joint, with full rotation and somewhat limited tilt. He has universal shoulders, but they're mounted on an angle, so they rotate a little weirdly. The biceps swivel, and their cut even matches detail on the animation model. The elbows have a good bend with soft detenting, but they do that weird floating elbow thing. Sadly, no wrist articulation. The waist rotates on a very tight swivel, with another soft detent to hold it in place when facing front. The hips are universal, but for some reason, my copy's right leg likes to move on its own when I move the left leg forward. The thighs swivel, again with a cartoon-accurate cut, and the knees once again are on a soft ratchet. The ankles also pivot inward, and I guess you can use the transformation hinge in his toe as a point of articulation? Pretty standard stuff overall. Apart from the lack of a wrist swivel, I have no complaints. You only get 2 accessories with this figure. One of them is his main weapon, the musket laser. Unlike the figure itself, which aims to recreate the cartoon model, the gun seems to be splitting the difference between the cartoon and toy designs. Which is rather impressive since there isn't much of a difference to split. The front half of the gun is very cartoon-based, but the back half seems more toy-based. And there are some details that are just completely original. It's a little bit strange, honestly, but then again, this isn't exactly an iconic design. Weirdly enough, his other accessory might be a little more familiar. It's the Energon goodie dispenser he used to feed the Alicons in the movie. Compared to screenshots of that scene, it looks pretty on model. Admittedly not a difficult task, considering that it's fundamentally just a bunch of stacked cuboids. But even the little details on the front are molded in, which is nice, even if they kind of get lost among molding artifacts. Though the recessed details on the sides are new. And of course, there's an Energon goodie sticking out of the top. It's just a static part, it doesn't come out or even retract into the dispenser, so it's basically just all for show, which isn't a bad thing. But what is a little annoying is that it's cast in the same clear blue as the windshield and eyes, when it's supposed to be the same pink as most Energons seen in the cartoon. It isn't even the vibrant blue color of later Energon depictions, it's just a dark pale blue. It looks fine, but it could have been better. But hey, at least it has some color to it here. The Buzzworthy release, which uses opaque gray plastic for his windshield to recreate the cartoon model, just leaves the Energon goodie unpainted. Okay, I kinda get that, paint budgets can be a little restrictive, but for some reason, every remold of this toy keeps the Energon goodie dispenser, but leaves it entirely unpainted. Why? You've replaced the windshield and head anyway, why keep the Energon dispenser? God, I am pissed at these toys I don't own. Sorry, where was I? Oh, right, I still need to talk about this toy's best feature. The bicep and thigh swivels are not standard mushroom pegs. Instead, they're just pegged on with 5mm posts, meaning you can take them off to recreate that time he got dismembered on Quintessa. And unlike that time they forgot to glue Bone Crusher's head together, this is 100% intentional, even if it isn't mentioned in the instructions. Now, admittedly, this does cause some issues, mainly that if the tolerances aren't right, the figure could legitimately fall apart on you. But come on, you gotta admit this is hilarious. Especially since you can do this. What makes this even funnier is that the included backdrop depicts that same scene on Quintessa, the Sea Squid showdown. The first thing I notice about this is the Sea Squid itself. It's rendered here with a ton more depth than its movie appearance. The shadows and highlights are so much smoother compared to the flat shading used in the movie, and if you get in closer, you can not only see all the scuffs and scratches in the squid's finish, but even the subtle base texture of the metal itself. It is so lifelike that it's almost uncanny, almost like those realistic drawings of Simpsons characters. At the same time, though, it kinda makes me want to see what an actual toy of the squid would look like. One minor issue I have with this is the scenery. In the movie, the sea squid fight happened in relatively open water. There were clusters of metal seaweed nearby, and there were some vague shapes of structures in the distance, but for the most part, the scene was pretty clear. This backdrop, meanwhile, shows a big dome and tower standing just left of the squid, and some other structure being obscured by the murk to the right. And the metal seaweed is just seaweed now, which kind of takes some of the charm away in my opinion. These big foreground elements are taken from the movie at least. We see them in this shot of Hot Rod driving into the scene. They're a very nice recreation of what we see in the movie, except they're facing the wrong direction. This shot is facing Hot Rod, which continues into a shot where Hot Rod is facing the squid. I realize I'm nitpicking here, but these are the sort of little details that are just noticeable enough to take me out of the experience. The backdrop still looks good though. Cup can stand surprisingly well on the base, even in a wide pose. It can be a little awkward to get him set up without blocking the view of the squid, and even harder to get a good looking fight scene, but if you play around enough with it, you should be able to get a lot more out of it than most Studio Series backdrops. Cup is an example of a really good thing marred by one very obvious flaw. Pretty much everything this toy does, it does very well. The vehicle mode captures the look of his original truck mode, the transformation is satisfying and clean, and the disassembly feature is more fun than it has any right to be. But it can be very difficult to look past the aesthetic weakness of the robot mode. Admittedly, this is the most screen-accurate toy Cup ever got, but there's still so much room for improvement, even with the buzzworthy redeco. Overall, I would recommend this figure, but I am hoping that a better version comes around at some point. Whew! Made it through the whole review without issue. Good to see I didn't leave any pieces out. Of all the circuit glitch, diode blowing dimwittery. New expectations, with fire in our eyes. Strong are the ties that bind us. We don't need no alibis. Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Not tonight.